And we're live. Welcome to Music Matters with Jason Tramm, and thank you so much for joining us for a unique podcast community where we explore the triumphs and challenges of the performing arts world as seen through the eyes of distinguished artists. Thank you so much for helping us grow. We just hit 1,885 subscribers as of today, and thank you so much. Every day our community grows and expands, and please like and share our videos, and remember to subscribe and smash that bell icon on YouTube for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. You can also check us out on our social media platforms on Facebook. This show is also on Facebook Live and YouTube simultaneously. So we have a wonderful guest today. We have acclaimed director Benjamin Spierman. Ben Spierman has directed all over the country, working for regional companies and opera all over, and really makes an interesting impact doing new productions, but also traditional productions, and we're going to talk about all that. Welcome, Ben Spierman.
Thank you, Jason. Great to be with you.
I always love having directors on the show. You guys have such interesting points of view, and I love the way the director's mind thinks.
Well, thank you. I hope to bring that mind to your audience.
So I know the answer to this one, but has music? When did you decide to become an artist? Has that always been in your life?
Well, that's sort of two different questions. Music's always been in my life. My dad is a conductor. Founded the Bronx Opera with, among others, my mother. My dad's Michael Spierman. My mother's Helene Williams Spierman Lehrman now. And so I really was surrounded by it, was surrounded both by the administrative side of it with Bronx Opera and the sort of the administrative / artistic side of it with my dad's conducting and the stage side of it with my mom. So I was around it my whole life. I've been around it since I was born, since in utero. I think my mother was doing Blonda and Abduction when she was pregnant with me, so literally in utero. And legend has it that the first time I ever rolled over was backstage at a rehearsal of Iolanthe. So already, Mozart and Gilbert and Sullivan, it was all just kind of there from the start. But my own choice to really go into it, I guess, was really happened in my 20s. I had been in shows. I had done G&S at Barnard College as a ringer. The first show that I directed was actually Ruddigore, Gilbert and Sullivan. But the really full decision to go into it was really in my mid-20s. At the time, I was working at the Bronx Council on the Arts as their grants administrator, working with arts organizations. And there came a point where it was try to do one thing or the other. And the job I had was kind of going to change. And instead of changing my job within the council, I changed my job to being a freelance artist. Started at stage managing, assistant directing. And as I like to say, my career as a temp began the same moment my career as a freelance artist began. So a lot of things kind of changed at that moment. But I would say mid-20s to late 20s was really when I committed to this as a career.
I get a lot of questions as a conductor. People who are in the business ask, "How do you become a conductor?" I guess becoming a director is a similar thing. I was a chorus master, and then I became an assistant conductor, and then a conductor. Yep. And it's an interesting path. But those times backstage, being a stage manager and assistant, those are the times that really teach you so much.
Yeah, in fact, I've done a lot of Bohèmes. I know you're doing Bohème soon, and I learned that show as an assistant stage manager. And there's no better way to learn Act 2 and the craziness of that Momus scene than cueing 10 people at once with all 10 of your fingers. So the working backstage and really working with other directors as assistants, as an assistant and as a stage manager was just absolutely invaluable. So actually was temping, because I felt like I learned from everybody that I've worked for out of the arts, just how to run a room, to be a boss, to delegate, to manage, and what people who are working for you need, especially if they don't know what they're doing, right off the bat. So it's one life, Jason. It's a holistic life, and everything that I've learned goes into what I do.
Isn't that amazing how, as a conductor, I think the same way. I was a high school teacher for 6 years before doing my doctorate and then becoming a professional conductor. And I learned how to run rehearsals by doing lesson plans every day and by doing 6 rehearsals a day. That taught me so much about time management. And it's right that your life, everything goes into your art.
Yeah, very much so.
So what was it like? What was your first directing? So you said I was in college, but in the professional realm, what was it like to get your first crack at directing professional singers?
Well, I was directing professional singers both at Bronx Opera and the company out in Brooklyn called Regina Opera from my mid 20s. And I think that was really funny. When I started out, I was younger than all the singers, not all the singers I worked for, but a lot of them. And I found that it was very important for me to really hit the ground running and know what I wanted right away. And I think that as I started to working with singers, what happened was I started to figure out that that mix of doing what I had planned and allowing the moment to dictate what it is that finally became the product. And I've come to the realization that really my plan and what the singer would do without me is neither of those things are going to be what you see on stage, and it's going to be an amalgamation of the two things, and that's what's really exciting. But I found, again, it's the combination of not being intimidated by someone else's experience, but not feeling that I have to try to be a martinet, because that doesn't really help anybody, and it's not my personality. And I realized that if I tried to be a martinet, I would kind of act like Opera Man, like Adam Sandler's character on SNL, and just like to sing angry notes at people, and that just wasn't helping. So it's that really wonderful combination of that's called collaboration, but true collaboration, which is a place where the combination of my ideas and what the singer brings to it, and what the conductor and the designers bring, is what you see. And if one or two people had been different, if there had been a different singer, designer, or conductor, what the audience ends up seeing would not be the same as what they end up witnessing. So I learned that over the years. That did not come immediately or easily, but it's something that really, I think, hope dictates my work now.
That's fantastic. How, and also, like, I find that over the years, your experience deepens. Every time I come back to a piece I've done before, it's almost completely different because I was different back then. And of course, every time you do a production, the show is completely different because the singers are different, the size of the stage is different. So I always find that it's like this is my 20th to 25th performance of Bohème. So I remember the first each kind of run. I have who sang it in my book, and I'm like, oh wow, this kind of reminds me. Each one takes you back. It's like the amber that the fly gets caught in, kind of wraps in those memories.
Very much so. Yeah.
What opera have you staged the most at this point in your career?
Oh, I think it may be Bohème. It's either Bohème or Don Giovanni or Carmen. I've done a lot of productions of the Impresario, Mozart Impresario, which is such a great portable piece because you can really, if you have a great single one-act opera or short opera, you can always put Impresario with it to make it a full evening. And I've done a bunch of those. We actually Bronx Opera did a film version of Impresario which we dropped last May, which I think was a lot of fun and amazing, and a whole other experience, which I think we'll probably talk about coming up, that the whole virtual world. But yeah, it's one of those. It's probably Bohème maybe. But Giovanni's not far behind, neither is Carmen.
How does a director find perspective? Now, you do a lot of varied rep, you do a lot of modern rep, you do a lot of you've done a lot of New York premiere rep. So when you take a piece, like how does your perspective change from show to show?
You mean from production to production on the same show?
Or just on, getting in different scores, different directors' concepts. Do you tend to do modern productions or mix it up, or how does that work?
I do a mixture. I had a manager who used to call me traditional with a twist, which is kind of accurate. I've done a lot of traditional work. I think that the older I get, the more I like to do some updating, but not always. I think some things don't really lend themselves to it. I think, for example, Nozze di Figaro does not really lend itself. I think Nozze wants to be in its world. I think other pieces, like maybe a Giovanni, maybe like we're going to do Clemenza, and Clemenza will be updated, and Clemenza will take, there's a disaster that is a major part of the early portions of the plot of Clemenza, which in the original was the eruption of Vesuvius, and my update will be to this year, imagining that the Roman Empire was a nation state in 2022, and as if the Roman Empire was dealing with modern issues, including COVID. So some pieces work, some pieces transfer, others don't. In terms of a new piece, It's really incredibly exciting for me to crack the score of a new work, whether it's new in general or whether it's just new to me, um, and learn about the context in which the piece was written, why it was written, the singers for whom it was written, what the original concept was, why people, even when they enter, how different the opera that was created was from whatever original source material there was. What did Mozart and Da Ponte, to speak of them, leave out of Beaumarchais' Mariage when they created Nozze? Why did they leave it out? Was it censorship? Yes, but it's also other choices. It's all I find all that stuff, all that sort of nerdy stuff, really interesting. Nerd
Me
is a
too.
cool thing, by the way.
As a conductor, I say you have to have opinions. You have to draw your opinions from knowing the score, knowing how the phrase
That's right.
structure works, know the harmonics, of course, knowing the harmonic
That's right.
choices the conductor makes. All those things are so important, and every little detail as a conductor, that I find that to be incredibly important. So I love working with directors who do their homework and bring these ideas, and because it's that's what makes opera so special. Is you have so many minds working together that the product is so special.
Yeah, yeah, totally, absolutely.
What has been some of the craziest productions you've been a part of as an assistant? I know I've been a part of some really modern productions and some interesting, and I find that some of them work great and some of them are a little more challenging. And I've done ones where some directors like to put the singers upstage facing the wrong way, and they wonder why you can't hear. It's sometimes when directors aren't singers or don't have that background, it can be very interesting. Especially, I've worked with a movie director who's doing their first opera, and it was a challenge. Let's put it that way.
I was pretty lucky as an assistant in that I really worked with very experienced opera directors, but people who were open minded. I was at Central City for 2 years, Central City Opera in Colorado, as an assistant, and worked with Michael Ehrman and Ken Kazan, both of whom have very unique ways of looking at pieces. I worked with a director in oh god, where was it? I'm forgetting now. Mississippi Opera, actually, with Jonathan Field.
I've
Um,
worked with Jonathan. He's
and,
wonderful. Yep.
and I found, yeah, he was a good director, and he kind of noticed, and we talked a little bit about my interest as a director, and we were able to talk about it a bit, and as I did with Ken and Michael a lot. But I think I didn't really assist on crazy shows. I assisted on some new things. I assisted on a new Lewis and Clark opera in the Lewis and Clark Bicentennial. I think back in 2003, which was called Dream of the Pacific. So that was really the one new opera, totally new opera I worked on. With Ken Kazan, I assisted on Britain's Gloriana, which is an incredible piece, which really gave me an appreciation for Britain that I didn't truly have before. So that opened my mind a lot. Yeah, those are probably my main experiences as an assistant. There were some times I worked with folks I thought didn't really know what they were doing, and that was a learning experience too. How not to run a room, how do you really remember as a director what you did and why you did it? Are you, is the director dedicated to their idea? So if they change it, they're changing from something that they knew to another thing that is a new thought, as opposed to just idea A was just a throwaway, and then idea B is equally a throwaway. And I learned that that's noticed by singers. Singers are very smart. The best singers are able to bring their own ideas to a production. They I think want the director to know what they're doing, conductor too. But and I'm sure you've experienced this, if they're looking at you, and if they think, I'm sure this never happens with you, but if it did, and someone thought you were an idiot, they will very quickly go, okay, I'm on my own. It's going to be my butt on the line on performance night, and I'm ready to do this myself. But if this director and conductor knows what they're doing, then so much the better for me, because then I'm not alone.
Yeah, I love singers and artists that bring. I was lucky to work with a lot of experienced older singers at the beginning of my career, and I got to watch like because the experienced veterans, the Met level veterans, they always show you. They show you everything they need, their breath, their indications. Often you really can understand what they're looking for. And I just love that. I love to see what a singer brings to the situation. I love to see the
Yeah.
first rehearsal, how they, how they can. I always have opinions on the way I take ideas and phrases, but I'm just always interested to see what the singer brings to the role too, because there's a reason usually if I cast it or if I'm guest conducting, it's a totally different thing. But
Yeah.
I like that first rehearsal. It's always kind of like opening my presents on Christmas and seeing what everyone brings to the table.
Yeah, I directed a guy named Timothy Noble who had been at the Met, and when I worked with him, he was Sharpless in a Butterfly that I did, and he was this combination of an 1830s American statesman with the suit and tie, very intimidating, and I was therefore intimidated. And the way that I dealt with being intimidated was to know what I was doing and not kind of sit back and wait too much. And he recognized that. I had known him as an assistant, but then I was directing him, and it was a totally different experience. And I don't remember what the idea was, but it was something where I gave a notice to him as Sharpless, and he'd done Sharpless 60 times. And he said, "You know what? I never thought of that before. That's a really good idea. I'm going to do that." And I must have gotten the look on my face, and he said, "Well, don't let it swell your head. You were right once." But like, but the willingness at that point to kid each other and to trust that, he'd listened to me, though he had done, the ratio of our butterflies was 20-1 at that point, but still he was willing to listen. And I remember that real sharply from, this is almost 20 years ago now, just of realizing, you know what, say what you think, work with these folks, and you'll figure it out together.
I love that kind of collaborative atmosphere. That's when it works the best, right? It's when we're all colleagues and working together.
Yep.
And I find that most singers are so supportive of each other, and they love to hear great ideas because it makes their production. It makes it more rich and more interesting to watch.
Yeah, I think our job as directors and conductors is to have the overall conception, and to understand that conception can't be so brittle that if you take one little card away, that it just falls apart like a house of cards. That there is flexibility within the construction, and that you can change something from what you wrote down in your book alone in your room, and it's not going to make the whole structure fall apart. Quite the contrary, it'll strengthen it, because again, it means you'll have a concept that everybody's has a stake in, and that strengthens the whole.
Have you ever been a part? I see sometimes, like I know I saw early on in my career that some directors direct every single motion, and it can get so detailed that I find that it can be a challenge, and sometimes they can be so finely crafted in sculpture, but in the end, everyone's got these different styles. Do you plan out your motions, your gestures, your staging? How much of that is? How much do you find is on the fly, and how much is planned?
I realize that I plan everything and end up using about half of it. One funny minor story is that when I did Regina, the Mark Blitzstein opera, we were rushing, and I'd written a particular piece of staging in my book where I wrote the name of the character, circled it, and put a gesture with an arrow sort of pointing like that over the name. And I was running out of time, and my wife was in the show, and one of our best friends, Hallie Gilbert, who you might have run into out in Jersey. And Hallie and Hannah were double cast, and I gave them my book, and I said, just look at this. This is the staging of your aria. And they saw this particular thing I'd written down, and they thought, does he want us to walk around like this with our hand over our head? Which is still a little joke in our house, but I think when I would say that the percentage of what is written down that ends up on stage has gone down over the years, to the point where it started out as in the high 90s. Like if you looked at my book, that's almost exactly what was there, to now where it's maybe half or less. because again, I get in a rehearsal and I realize I staged the piece in my book for my own conception of movement or conception of what the moment was. But in the moment, I looked at the singer and I thought that's not what should happen. And also, in Bronx Opera, it's a little bit different because we're usually double cast, and there I think maybe the ratio's a little bit more, but even there, it's not that high.
I always find double casting is a pretty interesting. You have to, do the staging. Do separate staging, or do you keep them pretty similar? Or does it change based on the artist singing the roles? How do you work
I
that
tend
out?
to think that because there's going to be one lighting plot, and Bronx Opera does not have foul spots, that the singer needs to be where the light is, and that kind of circumscribes what you can do. I tend to think in art productions here in Bronx that um, the singers should be in the same place at the same time. What they do between and how they get there and why, that's where the creativity, to use the word you used at the top of our conversation, that's where the creativity comes for each individual singer.
It's fantastic. I actually must admit, full disclosure, I sang in the ensemble of Carl Nielsen's Masquerada under your father at the Bronx
Is
Opera
that what you
about
did?
1,000 years ago.
Is that what? Okay, I need to. Was that 1999 or
Had to
couldn't have
be.
been 83?
Had to be 90. Yeah, if 83, I would have been like in eighth grade
You and
or
me
seventh
both.
grade.
Well, because we've Bronx has done Masquerada twice, and in '83 I was in it as a 14-year-old, so we're like the same age about. And in 19, it's funny because that was one of the few shows I was not involved in at all, the Masquerada in '99. So we have not met. Jason and I have not met in person,
One of
and
these
we
days, we'll
would
get
have.
together and have a beer. That'd be fun.
It would.
We have a
It
lot
would.
of mutual friends. And anyone in the business. What I love about this business is we're moved by one friend. So we ask around, we'll find each other pretty quick.
Yep, for sure, for sure.
It's a small industry and a lot of great people in it. So.
Very small. Yeah.
So now you're going full guns. You're working all over the place, traveling, doing productions all over the country, and then COVID hits, and we're all grounded. What was it like? How did you deal with that? And what's something you learned about yourself?
The first 2 months, I would say I did not deal with it well. Um, I was part of meeting. I'm part of the Bronx Opera is part of the New York Opera Alliance, which is a consortium of like 45, 50 opera companies around the city. We would have meetings, and people would say, "Well, we'll figure it out in 3-4 weeks." I'm like, "No, I don't think. I'm reading some things that are telling me a higher number." In the meantime, as COVID was hitting, I was also finishing my bachelor's degree, long delayed bachelor's degree. So I had that experience that everybody has talked about, which is that remote schooling thing. And I walked out of class on a Monday, and the next week I was back in class from my couch. And so that was mainly what I did for the first few months. Just concentrated on my classes and on eating pizza, so much pizza. Occasionally some quesadillas, just to change the kind of
Vary it
cheese
up.
that I was eating. But then Bronx Opera, we had to move our stuff, our stash of costumes and props, and that kind of needing to do a project brought me out of it. And then I started to work virtually. I directed a Gluck Orfeo with opera in Williamsburg in Virginia, but it was here. It was from my couch, which was a virtual production with a countertenor who was in Germany, one soprano in Rochester, and another one in Miami, and the producer was in Israel. So it was kind of, and the music, the vocals, and the orchestra had all been recorded previously. So we were kind of creating this lip sync concept, and that got me into the swing of doing the virtual work. And as Bronx did a preview of what's actually going to be our May 2023 production, which is Smetana's Bartered Bride. We did a preview of that for the New York Public Library. We did a couple of virtual programs for them. And then Bronx did our Impresario. I had a couple of virtual projects, one as a director, one as an actor, as part of my schoolwork. And I found that I really enjoyed the challenge of working visually. I had never taken a film class in my life. I think that as an actor, I had done one 2-minute student film back when I started in school 25 years ago. So, but really, the learning experience of thinking virtually was just fascinating, because in some ways A is Z and Z is A, because there the good things about it and the bad things about it are in some ways reversed. You don't get that magic of the live experience, but if you mess up the first take, you can do another one. And
Many
that was
takes. Yep.
like, you mean we can do that again, and no one will ever see the mess up, or we can do this piece in 3 parts and then stitch it together with some clever camera choices and some graphics and some stock footage. Our impresario is on YouTube, and people should search for it, Bronx Opera Impresario on YouTube. And I say that because I think it ended up being really good.
Cool.
And really funny and but different than it would have been live. Like I said earlier, I've done like 6 or 7 impresarios live, and this was not the same animal, but it was still fulfilling.
Do you
And
find that the action has to be much closer and I know for film actors they always talk about everything that every motion has to be so tiny because they kind of pan in quite a lot usually, and on the stage we have these large stages and we're far away. So do you find that as a director it changes the way that you have to direct it?
it does a little bit. I think that the choices that you make need to be more intentional. Like, I think sometimes on stage, I sort of liken good operatic acting to really good film acting from the Bette Davis, Joan Crawford era, where those actors were acting for an image the size of what we are right now, but they were not going to be tiny with their choices, and you still need to find that reality. But reality on stage is maybe 10 times, to use just a number, what the real life is like. I don't think it's 1-to-1 in film, but I think it's certainly closer, maybe to 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 or 3-to-1. It depends on what you're doing. Impresario was a larger scale thing, and it was comedy, so you can kind of take some liberties you couldn't take if you were doing trying to do something a little bit more serious. But it is a different mindset. Yeah.
Pretty interesting how these choices are. Any desire to do any straight plays without music, or
absolutely.
any film or television? Any thoughts?
I would love to do non-musical plays. It's just I did some. That was my original training, was in acting and theater directing back when I was at Hunter the first time. My graduation was from Lehman, but my original schooling was at Hunter College here in New York. And I would love to direct a straight play, love to direct a play. I did it back in the day. I haven't done it in a long time, and I'm trying to find opportunities to do it. I did a non-musical film play, Zoom play, a couple of times, but that's not the same thing. I would love to work on stage. Film, sure. If I ever go back for further schooling, a master's or PhD, it'll definitely be in film, because I feel like I instinctively I picked up a lot of stuff, and Bronx Opera has a great team that we work with. Andrew Morellis is our director of photography on our pieces, and Max Bowman does our video design, and I've learned a lot from them. But I feel like there comes a point where you need to do further learning than what you just learn in the course of osmosis. And so that I would love to learn those disciplines more, and would love to do a play.
I think that's what's so great about what as a conductor, you never get tired of learning. I mean, like you were saying, the joy of discovery. Whenever I've got new scores, a new symphony I haven't done, or a new opera I haven't done, I've got a stack of things I've got to be conducting next month or so. But I've done a lot of them before. But I always try to sneak in some new stuff that I've never done to keep myself fresh and sharp, or a new composer, a commissioned piece. It really is like the most exciting thing to be at 3 a.m. and I'm learning a new score. It's like a kid on Christmas Eve.
Yeah, I'm actually I've got some stuff coming up in the fall, one of which is a completely new Dracula opera by a composer named Andrew Ager, who is in Ottawa. So that'll be my international debut.
Congratulations.
And thank you. I'm doing an opera that was written in the U.S. because I think only Holocaust era internment camp, which was for Jews, which is not known about much here in the U.S., that some Jews came to the U.S. and were interned at a camp in northern New York State, on the edge of Lake Ontario in Oswego. And one of the people there wrote a short operetta, which we're producing at Oswego Opera in coming up. So that's not a new work, but it's never been seen before. So those are new scores that I'm cracking. And then, there's Clemenza, which I did once before, and stuff with Bronx Bartered Bride, which I've never directed, but which I've been in, actually. So the combination of some stuff that's new to me and stuff that's a little bit older to me is really exciting. Like you're saying, if you can get to do something new, whether for yourself or for, in general. And also Bronx Opera is looking to do a commission. We're starting to work on a commission which will be a first for Bronx. So a lot of stuff's coming up that's very exciting.
You don't have to give it away. Do you have a theme or a librettist? Do you have to start with the source material or the plot? How do you start a commission project like that?
Well, in this particular case, this is a composer that we know well as a singer, and also we know his work. And the librettist is actually also somebody that I worked with as a singer. I won't give too much away about the subject matter, but it is selected, and it is one of the works of Dumas Père.
Oh, okay.
One of his novels, and these are two African American creators who are working on a project which, although at first glance it is not what you would call an African American subject, when you dig a little bit deeper and you remember that the Dumas family were people of color. The themes of these and the themes of his novels so often deal with the outsider and someone who's pushed away from the center of the social fabric, whether it's the Man of the Iron Mask or it's the Three Musketeers. And I'm using those examples because neither one of those is the topic. But it's a very interesting sort of an angle on this kind of the relationship of blackness to society, and not through the prism of our current age, but through the prism of a time, 200 odd years ago. But and in this case, this was a topic that these guys were working on when I found out they were working on it, and we've started to talk to them about developing it further.
So 23, 24-ish? What do you think into it?
Hopefully May of 24. I think time flies, man, doesn't it?
Especially in this art form, yep.
It's really 2022? Can't be. I do not believe it. That would be probably it might be May of 24 or early in 25. We'll see. It's all still very much in the formative stages, but the conversations are beginning and they'll continue intensifying.
I love to see new creations come to life and new teams, and that's what's great about opera is every we put these universal human stories out there. We find these great libretti and a new composition team. I can't wait to see what this is. It's really exciting.
You and me both.
So what's something you learned about yourself during this COVID period?
Flexibility, the ability to be flexible, the ability that my ability to learn continues to, the limitations continue to occasionally depress me, and the freedom of being willing to learn continues to make me happy. I am alternately frustrated by my limitations and inspired by my lack of limitations, and the limitations and the lack of limitations can alternate, day to day, and that's, I think, been one of the interesting things. And I was, if you had told me in April or May of 2020 that I would have done as much as I've ended up doing that was as different from one thing different from the other as it's been, I don't think I would have believed you. It's still hard. I also realized that my wife and I get along really well, which I knew already, but we spent 24/7 together for a long time, and we both like the same kinds of shows, and the amount of YouTube we've watched is boggles the mind.
All of us, we've binged and binged and binged, and
binged so much.
It reminds me, like, where would we be without the arts during chimes like we had last 2 years if we didn't have that? Thank God we had that resource. That we
Yeah,
remember how important entertainment and art is in our lives at these times.
yeah, and even things like the Hamilton film, for example, being put on Disney Plus. Uh, a lot of what the Met did early in the pandemic, where they were really allowing you to watch their streaming stuff for free for a while, and it kept the flame burning at a time when, for me, I don't know what it was like for you, Jason, but for me, those first couple months were just like, what is
I
this?
live in the burbs and I have 4 kids, and I did tons of yard work, and all my rehearsals went virtual, and I didn't stop traveling, and all my guest conducting things were canceled. So it turned into a lot of home, a lot of yard work, and then I started the podcast because I needed to do something creative.
I think I would also say another thing that was very important during the pandemic, and I think we could all learn from, is compassion, because a lot people dealt with that in very different ways, and it was very important to be patient with how everybody, each individual, processed their experience. I know that it was, my dad is a person, he's in his late 70s, and he's not an internet guy. He's not going on YouTube. If I say to him, there's this great production of Clemenza on YouTube, he'll get to it, but it's not this natural thing of, oh, I'm just going to boop, 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 do that.
On my phone, and yes.
Right. And it's been hard for him. For other people, it's been a good thing almost. And I think you have to understand that things are different. And I think my dad's come out of it real well. And he conducted the orchestra for Impresario and Trial by Jury, and Clemenza is going to be live, and he's done a couple of live concerts. But it's different, and it's different for each individual. And to maintain that level of compassion and say, okay, I'm fine with this. Netflix and we're already buddies, but if you're not there, that has to be respected and not sniped at, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think the compassion thing, I mean, how many of our industry people lost all of their livelihood? I mean,
All of it.
from
Yeah.
the top singers in the business to the people of the up and comers, everyone was just like on the shelf. I mean,
Yeah, and a lot of organizations also went under or were just severely damaged by by what happened. We Bronx Opera, we were in a position with the show we were supposed to do that in May of 20, where we hadn't really spent any money on it, and so we were able to, end up not building scenery for a show we didn't do. But not everybody was in that position, and so I think compassion for organizations as well has been important.
well, it's been interesting to watch things come back, and
Yeah.
and come back they have, and I think there's a lot of creativity going on right now. It's been an interesting ride for all producers I know, in terms of like COVID protocols and how do we do testing and how do we practice the mask situation. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's amazing how creative the creative industry can be when we have to be.
Yeah, I did an HMS Pinafore in Oswego, upstate, last in the fall, where there were people I never saw, whose faces I never saw until dress rehearsal. I did not see them from the masks down, and these couple people took off their masks, and I thought that is not the face that the creative software of my brain thought you had. It was a really. And we had rehearsed masked, and then we had come to dress rehearsal, and for the first time everybody was unmasked. It was like, wow, this is a different world.
2022 or
Yep.
2021, whatever it was. It's just
That's right.
it has
2020
been
was.
interesting. But the first rehearsals back, and I did a big orchestra concert this summer, and it was just so emotional. Everyone was just so emotional,
Yeah.
and I find that we all have a renewed sense of why we do this and how
Mm-hmm.
important it is in everyone's lives.
Yeah, the connection that we all make with each other when we create is something that we were able to do. I think a little bit of in the course of the virtual work, but not the same. I mean, there's one of the singers from the Orfeo. I talked to her every day for 6 weeks. I've never met her. I've never met her in person. And there was one singer who was in that also, who I worked with live in a show in Williamsburg, who I met, and I was like, you are way shorter than I thought you were. And and real and cool and fun. But wow, you're not. It is not the same. I think you can connect over the net like we're doing, but it's not the same. And so that drink or that beer or that coffee, Jason, anytime.
It's just I love connecting with artistic colleagues. It's
Yep.
always great to just sit down with people and.
Yep.
But it's amazing what you can do on the virtual platforms. We have this conversation, and I'll have a conversation with a 8-string guitar player in northern Macedonia, North Macedonia, or like someone in Australia, or a composer, and I'm just amazed by the connections we can make in these platforms. It really is fascinating.
Yeah, it's a gift. We're lucky. We're lucky that the technology exists. It does make you think about 1918 to 1920 and how when they were quarantined, they were truly quarantined. They
But think about this. This boggles, as a historian, as a scholar, it just boggles the imagination because in the Spanish flu, the Met didn't cancel one performance. I mean,
right.
think about that. Life didn't stop like it did for us. I mean, for 2 years. I mean,
Yep.
this is truly not just once in a lifetime, but once in the history of these organizations of Broadway and the Met, like truly extraordinary times we're in.
Yeah, very much so.
What do you think the industry's learned? Some of the positive things you've seen that the industry's learned during this challenging time?
Well, I hope that the industry has learned that using these virtual tools is a good way to get the message out of what you're doing, not just to the local community, but also to the wider world at large. With our impresario, for example, we had people watching it who would never have been able to have seen it in if it were all live. We're doing this trial by jury we're doing will be a film screening, which will happen on March 20th at Lehman, but it will also exist in a virtual form, and so you will still be able to get at least some of the experience of it online on YouTube. But I think what's interesting is I hope what the two sides of this coin are that we've learned that you can do a lot and communicate artistically and personally in really great ways virtually, but it doesn't replace live experience. It's important to continue to be hybridized. I think that we can't just say, well, thank God that's over with. Never want to see a ring light again. I never want to hear the word Zoom again. No, Zoom enabled so many relationships to be continued or to be created between artists and between human beings during 2021 and even into 22. Bronx Opera we do senior citizens choruses, which we run at senior centers, and there's one center where folks are not ready to come back live. They are not ready to be in the same room. But that enables us to continue the work. The other center, they're ready to come back, so we're able to go live. But I hope that we take the lesson that these media are useful and can help us project ourselves in a way that we could have before, but we didn't necessarily think about. People did little intro videos, but it was never the entire show. And now we've had this experience, and I hope that those lessons continue even as we come back to live action, and in-person work and in-person just experiences.
Thank you for sharing your wisdom on that. What advice do you have for young aspiring directors coming up in the field right now?
Do everything. Perform. I have been lucky. I have performed. I have worked backstage. I have stage managed, AD'd. I've been a stagehand. I have performed actually a pretty fair amount. I even played cymbals, which, let me tell you, the Rachmaninoff second cymbal part is no joke. And I immediately thought I was in over my head, but that's a whole other conversation. Do as many things as you can. I think that's what we should all do. Singers should stage manage. Directors should perform. Because then you really understand how it all works, because any kind of theatrical and especially operatic performance is the true team effort. And opera and theater is a team sport, and the more you understand how each part of the team works, the better you're going to be at doing the job that maybe you, as like in my case, directing, that you decide is your calling in the field, without giving short shrift to the things that other people do. And you can be able to do it in the pinch too, which is helpful.
And when you run a company, these little things are really important. There's no unimportant jobs. One thing falls, it affects everybody.
Yep, totally, absolutely. And if it's addressed, it never mind. It's a whole other. Yeah, we all seen that. In fact, my pants fell down on stage once, so I have literally felt that feeling. So when we talk about it being important that everybody's clothing fits, I have a very visceral memory of that experience.
The costume designer, the conductor. I always tell my students, if I write a book, it's the first chapter is going to be called "Be Nice," because being a good colleague is an important part about being in the business.
Yeah, I knew a wig and makeup person who had figured out just where to put the pin so that it would create a splitting headache that the performers would never know about. And I don't know that she ever did it, but the fact that she knew how to do it was a little terrifying. And I occasionally tell that story to make clear to people that they should be nice. Be nice.
Always, if you have a choice.
You never know who knows what.
So where can people go to find out more about you and also about the Bronx Opera?
You can email Bronx Opera at bronxopera@gmail.com. Email me at benspierman@gmail.com. That Spierman is Spider-Man without the D. We are getting our website back in shape, and you can find us, Bronx Opera, at bronxopera@gmail. And you can find out about me at Benjamin Spierman at, Bronx Opera, bronxopera.org is what I meant. I don't know why I said that. And benjaminspierman.com. So
Fantastic.
the Gmail email addresses and our names.org.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and continued success.
Same to you, Jason. Thank you for the chance to talk to you.
Thank you for joining us on Music Matters with Jason Tramm. Please remember to subscribe and smash that bell icon for the most up-to-date information on our upcoming guests and topics. We have our next show on Saturday at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. We have renowned Austrian piano concerto soloist and teacher Serena Ost-Ionian. So I hope you can join us there. And remember, keep music alive.